which in turn makes it harder to measure, understand, improve, all those things we're going to talk about today. So we really want to inspire better practices across the industry. We want to enable brands in their factories to build better partnerships, enable teams to produce and deliver better products. So through our platform, brands can invite factories and seamlessly build collections. They can manage sourcing, sampling, purchase orders, cost negotiation, payment terms, everything through one single platform. And kind of really capture and manage all their product, order, and supplier information in one place. So that's a bit about me and our business.
Wonderful. And Antoine?
Hi, hi to everyone. My name is Antoine T. I'm the founder and CEO of Ulula, and Ulula is a recently B Corp corporation that helps companies monitor and human rights and labor rights in their global supply chains and operations. The way we do that is we leverage simple mobile phones to connect directly and anonymously with workers and communities to get their feedback and be able to empower other organizations, the supply chains, to make better decisions and to protect them. So we work in about 30 countries. We've reached close to 1.5 million people, and we work with a number of fashion brands to really help them understand how they can improve worker well-being and mitigate risks such as forced labor, child labor, and I'll tell more.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for those introductions. So let's dive into this. The main topic for today's panel is, of course, the future of impact assessment. So let's talk about impact assessments for a little bit, especially like at a product level. And all of you in some format work with impact assessments across company supply chains. So from your perspectives, what aspects of a product's impact are the most important to assess or that a company should focus on, especially within the fashion industry? And what do you think is maybe underserved that needs to be examined more closely? Sam, maybe you could kick us off, because I know Remake's doing a lot of work around that.
Yeah, so at Remake, the way we kind of evaluate products or brands really is through our Remake Seal of Approval, which is what we use as a sustainability criteria methodology, which is based on, traceability and transparency. So really looking at supply chain transparency, product traceability, and ethical sourcing. And then we look at maker well-being. So really asking, is a garment worker's life benefiting from producing this product? Are they being paid a living wage? Are they gaining skills, access to resources to really invest and enrich their lives? What's the environmental sustainability impact, sustainable raw materials being used? And then really, what is leadership and diversity and inclusion across from HQ throughout the value chain look like? And for us, we kind of, really scrape what's being publicly disclosed. We focus a lot on transparency as a driver to hold brands accountable within this industry. And to receive Remake Seal of Approval, you have to at least score 50 at minimum. Most brands today do not score above a 50. So there's lots of room of improvement. That's kind of the tool we used. We created it for our community to help them buy and wear their values, but it has also become a tool for driving transparency, and a tool we've been using a lot for our Pay Up campaign, which I'm sure many of y'all have heard about over the past year. And I think for us, and why I was really excited to be a part of this conversation, is because, there's so much room for innovation and for uses of data and technology when it comes to the specific element of maker well-being. Like, how are we really bringing into conversations and monitoring human rights in these issues, the livelihood of garment workers throughout these supply chains, as we have, over-anchored in a way on environmental sustainability with a lot of life cycle assessments. So how now are we going to move to almost a more urgent discussion around the livelihoods of the people who make these clothes?
Wonderful. Antoine could have spoken a bit more on that, but unfortunately, there seems to be an issue with his internet maybe Flora, you can jump in a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, he can speak on kind of in more detail on measuring kind of social well-being and impact on that side. I think from our side of things, working very much in the kind of buying practices, the production processes, obviously capturing products impact is absolutely critical and one critical piece of a quite big complex jigsaw puzzle. And so I think really it's important not to overlook design choices for end of life and circularity. It's really important to consider that product. I think it's so easy to, when you're shopping on a website and you look at that product in isolation, it's so important to consider that as part of a range, as part of a much larger system. And thinking about, what often gets left out of the conversation is how that product was produced in terms of the practices of that business, the buying practices. Did they actually pay that supplier late? Did they actually negotiate? What were the payment terms of that order? How many couriers did they actually have? What about the components? How many rounds of samples did they do? Was that product the only one in that run that actually got ordered and all the others were sampled and not purchased? Were there loads of last minute changes in that happened in that process? What were their behaviors? Did they cancel other orders? So I think it's got to be considered in a wider context, because a sustainable product is only as sustainable as the kind of system that it exists within. So I think ultimately there's so many different parts that need to be analyzed together, and there's no one organization that is ever going to be able to do that. And so I think it's about technology, which obviously we're going to speak much more in detail. I don't want to jump ahead, but it's kind of understanding that the system is bigger and it's not just a product on its own.
Wonderful, and great timing, Antoine, to reconnect. So Sam and Flora just kind of talked about what's missing right now with a lot of the assessments and the impacts that are being done is the social aspect of things. And we're guilty of that at Green Story as well, because we focus on LCA, and that's very focused. Environment is very important, and it's really focused on that. But the social component is something that's very hard to measure, that's missing. And I think with Ulula, that's what I find really amazing about the company. It's you do bring that to the forefront, social transparency, and kind of maybe looking at measurements around the social impact as well. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, and sorry for the mishap. I'm joining from my phone now, so I hope it's so. As you said, yeah, the focus of Ulula is really trying to understand what the demands being behind the products and the fashion products, specifically for that audience. And so we do that by, I think what's unique about Ulula is we ask the workers directly what their conditions are, because they are the best place to give us insights into how our wages being paid on time, or our working hours fair or not. Are they able to make ends meet because they are paid a wage that meets the basic minimum standards of living? So that's the sort of things we do. And to give you an example, we've been collecting workers from about 200,000 workers during the pandemic, and we have seen, I think, the toll of the pandemic on mental health, on discrimination, on a number of workers being asked to quarantine without any compensation. So that's the sort of things that we've been working on. Obviously, Remake has done tremendous work in that. So it's amazing to share the stage with you guys on that. But that's the type of things that we do, and obviously we see that data being really instrumental to having. I don't think you need to choose between. You can choose between being social or environmental, and the two are intimately related. We work a lot with migrant workers, and the reason migrants end up in factories being used is because of climate change, and vice versa. If you don't pay migrants well, then they'll use poor practices in chemicals, etc., in a number of industries. So I don't think I think it's a false dichotomy between the two fields.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out there, I think the work that Anton is doing has been so helpful to an organization in a way like Remake, because so much of and I love that you called out speaking to the workers directly, because that's what we constantly see as this like missing link is, are the people collecting the data working with the brands, or are they actually working with the workers? And is this data collection and technology innovations for the benefit of brands, or actually for the benefits of workers and putting workers at the center? And so much of our work over the past year of running the Pay Up campaign, which to like Flora's point, talking about canceled orders and payment terms, like was all about calling out the $40 billion worth of orders that were canceled, POs, which the fashion industry uses, which has no concrete contract terms to it. And then through Pay Up, we were able to unlock around 22 billion to go back into the system. Now it's a whole other job to kind of make sure that it's going back directly to the garment workers and they're being paid. But it's just this, so much of our work was trying to get data as quickly as we could. And so it was kind of every Thursday meeting at 7 a.m. with, the Workers' Right Consortium, with Stand Up Sri Lanka, people on the ground, people collecting data, and you're constantly kind of trying to keep track of what's happening, get feedback from on the ground. So kind of like it's knowing there's, we lost Anton again, but knowing there's solutions like his that is producing this data and kind of constantly working that really helps, organizations like Remake, who act as that elevator, that voice to bring these discussions to the mainstream, and can kind of continue to use them to hold brands accountable. Because for a lot of what Flora pointed out, brands just cancel orders, and what are their purchasing practices look like? And so much of what we're moving now is moving to a place where we have concrete purchasing practices that, garment workers can actually push back on or use to hold their employers accountable, and suppliers can hold brands accountable too.
I think you're on mute.
So many technical problems today. This is a very interesting point on accountability, though, because a lot of like what's out there is from a brand's perspective, but you have to look at all the stakeholders. You have to look at the workers, you have to look at the consumers, and kind of give them also the same level of transparency you would give to the CEO of the brand that you're working with. To that point, Flora, you were talking about like how technology is kind of helping with that when you were giving your initial answer. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's actually just it's so interesting because at the beginning of Supply Compass, I moved to India to live for 2 years. I spent 2 years visiting factories and tanneries and mills and just researching, asking questions and understanding. I could see the challenges. We would hear fashion businesses in Europe say, this is what we need, these are our goals. And we needed to understand from the other side there's many sides, but we were going to focus on the manufacturer direct kind of tier 1 supplier at this point, or tier 2. And what we saw was that so many manufacturers and suppliers had been left out of this impact conversation because they couldn't understand, for them, it's like, well, what's the benefit? I'm just going to invest in this or do that. I'm told to do this. It's got to work. And I think what we saw in these 2 years that was so interesting is that there was all these shiny new tools that were kind of cropping up for fashion businesses. And what was there for factories and suppliers? There was such a lack of innovation that had considered them in this journey. And I think from day one for us, it was always about building a two-sided product, which as a head of product is very complicated to design. Like every day, my head is split in two. I'm a factory, I'm a brand. I'm like, how will our factory user use it? Okay, I do user testing of our product on factories and I do the same on brands. What's the implication if a brand changes their payment terms at this point? Do we prevent them from doing that? Do we have a pop-up saying, ooh, you're not allowed to do that because of this? And if a factory does something late, so it's this kind of two-sided platform. For us, that is the only way to improve practices, is to drive accountability, is to have boxes that have a compulsory field that says, you cannot do this until you do this. You've officially approved that material, lab dip, strike off. You can't undo that because this has now been sourced and this will be the impact. So I think there's so much power in nudging people towards doing the right thing, purely because if it's on email, people can just change. People can, back to Sam's point, if a purchase order is sent via an email, you can as easily just not follow up on that. If a system says it's here, it's a lot harder. It's a lot more of a commitment.
Anything to add on that, Sam and Antoine?
No, I mean, maybe one point. I mean, we did to maybe respond or add to what Sam was saying. We did a report with the Better Buying Institute on how purchasing practices affect workers, and it was in Vietnam, so I think it was not in one country which was most severely affected by the pandemic, but nonetheless, not only did we find that poor purchasing practices were directly affecting how workers were paid and the other benefits they had access to, but what was also interesting is that women were particularly affected by that. So not only workers in general were severely affected when buyers were not, abiding by the terms of their purchase orders, but also the burden and the brunt of the adjustments was borne disproportionately by women. So salary reductions are affecting women even more than men, etc. So also just that I think added component, which is I think a sad repetition of what we see across the board, but a reminder that I think in that pandemic, I think women have been I think they're more severely affected even than men in that respect and in many others.
That seems to be the saying across the board, no matter what industry, is women across the board have been impacted by the pandemic more than men. Yeah, I mean, 75 million people work across the fashion supply chain, and 80% of those are women. And most of those women, are not in leadership positions, are not supervisors. So a lot of what we're talking about is, how do we create this? We talk about maker well-being, which is a nice way of saying, like these women face gender violence. There was recently Remake published the story about the woman in H&M's factory that was raped and killed. And so, we're not just talking about having a living wage, but we're talking about protecting the actual safety of these workers who are making their clothes. And so a lot of it, what I'm excited to see these kind of like impact assessment, data traceability kind of conversations move to, which is like protecting and improving the actual safety of people's lives within the fashion supply chain too. And it kind of like what's been interesting that I was thinking a lot about kind of prepping for this conversation is so many parts of like LCAs or impact assessments are all done voluntarily, and it's all voluntarily reported by brands, or it's done by audit committees. And we've been using these audits and due diligence systems for, more than 10 years now, but have we actually made any type of massive impact in this space? So one thing, us at Remake are really focused on is let's move beyond these committees created by brands or these kind of internal voluntary assessments into actually third-party assessments, or how can we use data to move forward legislation? Because it seems like regulation is going to be one of the only things to influence and change these worker lives as well. So I don't know if anyone kind of adds that conversation, but I know that's like what we're constantly mulling over, trying to build the conversation up more about at Remake too.
Absolutely. I think what we're doing right now is very much first steps. Even something like LCA, which, in my opinion, should be standardized across the industry everywhere. It's something that 1% of brands actually bother to look at, right? And it's like the bare minimum a brand needs to do to actually live by their, sustainability commitments. And most brands are not able to do it. There's so many issues with data availability, as you said. A lot of it is voluntary. A lot of suppliers, and this also goes to Flora's point. Like it's like these systems are built for one stakeholder, but maybe not. It's not easy enough to for a supplier to fill in an LCA request. We're finding that with our systems as well. So we're also building it in two ends now: one for the consumers and brands, and one for the suppliers, so they can have the confidence that that data will not be leaked, or whatever it is, that the privacy will be maintained. At the same time, we can have the confidence that they're not making stuff up and putting it in, right? So it's a very complex and interconnected system that's being built in, and it's still like very much in the infancy. I don't think like the scale of what's being done right now would have been possible 5-6 years ago in terms of the data and in terms of the visibility that we're having. As low as it is, it's still something.
Yeah, I think for it to speed up and for it to move from being 1%, there needs to be legislation change. It needs to become kind of expected, but also for it to be expected and part of a process, it needs to be easy. fast, scalable. It can't be expensive to do. It's got, like, if you think, I also understand that for fashion businesses, think how many things they've got to think about going through a pandemic, loss of sales, all of these things. And on top of that, they have to think, they should be thinking about this. But this is, if it's an additional cost, additional time, making room for that, you have to go, right, where else am I going to cut costs? I can't touch the unit cost of my product. You've got to be smart. You've got to invest in, got to operationally, when you look at where the kind of costs are in fashion brands, there's a lot of inefficiencies that you can save costs elsewhere so that you can be focusing on different parts of your organization, focusing on understanding impact, because it's about investing now for long term, because those businesses who don't make those changes now, I think will struggle to be around in the future if they aren't taking it seriously today.
And it's also about, I think, communicating with different stakeholders, because everybody has a different way that gets to them. Like for the investor, it's about the money. I mean, showing the charts and showing ESG investments makes a difference. While for everyday consumers, they might not want to look at the charts. They want to look at the story. Sam, to your point, talking about the person who was brutalized somewhere, that kind of really gets into people's heads and allows them to make all those decisions to be a bit more sustainable. And that's actually a good kind of jumping off point. And my next question, the limitations that we see right now with the technology solutions, and what do you see maybe coming down the line that can address some of these limitations, and how can we address it? Is it from a technology point of view? Is there like some solutions out there, or as you said, is it more around legislation, activism? What else can be done around that?
I don't know. I mean, what we are seeing is a massive shift in regulation at the moment. I mean, in Germany and the Netherlands have made very serious legislative commitments to mandatory human rights due diligence on the social side, right? And the European Union Parliament has approved by wide majority also the principles of mandatory human rights due diligence. So that is going to create, two good things. One is it is moving towards mandatory versus optional and voluntary approaches. And second, I think because of the movement of the European Union, it's also potentially offering an opportunity to harmonize more and standardize how these disclosures and processes are going to happen, which I think should be welcome. And we've seen the response from some corporations that I think are welcoming that, because you don't have to abide by a maze of regimes that would contradict one another. So I think there is some really important movement there to widen the adoption of technology, right? I think on the cost element, at the moment companies are spending money on audits that are not necessarily giving a lot of returns on these investments, and so there is an argument. I think there is a case for audit, to be sure, but I think it's where and when you should send somebody on site. I think that's the question, and when and where technology can play a role to provide you the data and provide you the insights that you need to make these decisions and to take action. I think that's where I see a lot of usefulness of technology. The limitations is we are just tools. We're not. It's you can produce data, you can make it flash, you can make it go to your inbox and send you an SMS. But at the end of the day, the governance of the technology is really what matters. If you're not disclosing data back to third parties, worker representatives, or others, if it's not the basis of social dialogue, then you have you're going to be very limited in the impact that you can generate.
Anybody else have any questions? Hello?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that.
Sorry, I just saw that you dropped off, Sam. That's why I said hello there. Good. You seem to have popped right back in.
Oh, yeah. I didn't miss a beat. Yeah, I just wanted to add too, like what we're seeing in the U.S., which is exciting as well, is in California, we're working to get past the multi-state system in California, the Garment Worker Protection Act, or SB 62, which will protect the elimination of wages. Basically, people pay per piece in the U.S., mostly in LA's garment industry, and that's leading to women making max $600 a week at best. And so really, this is again, adding to changing purchasing practices, adding to changing how women are paid, and giving them an ability to push back and to protect their own wages. And I think so much is going to have to happen at this like legislative issue, because in a way, you know, what we've seen is like technology doesn't actually solve problems in a way. It just helps make, you know, existing problems that exist, I don't know, more efficient, or things happen faster. So you need like legislation to create a new scenario for the way that business runs. And I think if tech can actually create data to help us advocate for these new policy changes, you know, that's really where we need to be headed. And then I didn't know if Flora had like an input on, I saw the person's question of, do you think social LCAs can or will be used more in the fashion industry to scale social impacts, knowing kind of like you're sitting more at the like helping businesses run their business more efficiently? Like, could it be realistically that social LCAs are, you know, allocated into that system or fit into that? I was curious, like your take.
I mean, definitely, like a bit, you know, we don't want to run before we can walk in everything that we can do. And it's you know, we have a vision 5 years down the line that essentially all of these things are just kind of automatically calculated as you go along the journey. Because ultimately you need to know when you're picking a material, when you're sourcing material from our digital material library, you need to go, right, is that the right material for me to use? When you're picking the right factory to work with for that order, you need to, you know, this information needs to be given to you at that moment you're making that decision. I think where a lot of the challenges lie is that, you know, this information is gathered, and I think maybe this is something that we were going to talk about a bit later anyway, but information is gathered and it might sit in the hands of a few. It needs to sit in the hands of everyone in that organization. You can't have it sitting just in the sustainability team. The designer needs to be empowered, the production manager, the person making that call on when to make that purchase order. Like we often, you know, we start working with someone in an organization who really gets our vision, and then we get handed over to someone who ultimately at the end of the day, what they care about is margins. And so they sacrifice these changes, they push back on things that we've put in place, and that's really hard. So I think for us, like, to see that change happen is that it has to be built into our process. But to do that, it's going to take us time. And I think that, you know, our journey is kind of, let's think about the places that we can have the greatest impact quickest. Like an area that we're really interested in looking at is we've built out this costing feature where you send out your styles for costings automatically in the system to your factory, and you go through recosting. And we want to build in the local minimum fair wage kind of when it comes back with that costing, which is actually really easy for us to do. We've got the location of the factory, we have all the information about the factory, we know how many workers they've got, we know all of this information, and we know how many styles that brand's producing. So actually it's just quite a simple equation, and you could pop it up and say, do you know, in order to pay the fair wage in this market, you would need to pay this. You don't make someone do it, you put it up in front of them at that right point. So I think like we haven't built that yet, but we know that actually that isn't the kind of thing that's that hard to build, and that is where I get really excited. But to get on that journey, what we kind of need is for fashion businesses and their manufacturers to start getting comfortable using technology to communicate and to manage. And that's probably our biggest barrier, is that behavioral change from, I've been working on email and Excel all my life, this is how it's worked for 40 years, and this is how it's going to work for another 40 years, to the future looks different, I need new tools for it. And that's probably that point we're at the moment.
Yeah, I love
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I love what you call out there, because like right now we're talking about the massive limitation, which is like data and technology is only as good as the person using it, is only as impactful as, you know, the person's hands that it's in. And what we saw so much for why pay ups, or like why people started canceling orders and why we had to start the pay up campaign is, yeah, you had supply chain managers who were like, oh, I'm being taught to protect my business, I'm just going to cancel these orders and I'm doing my job. And then they saw that other companies just did the same. So I guess this is an okay move. And then you came to this crippling effect that hurt these women down the roads. And that's so much what we're working on at Remake, in a way, is start having those conversations now with students in universities who are going to be those future designers, future merchandisers, future kind of planners, working in the fashion industry, and talking to them about ethical buying practices, ethical merchandising. You know, what does that really mean to learn the skill sets to be in the fashion industry, but to, you know, think with a ethical mind when it comes to people and the planet as well. Because yeah, that's going to be a massive hurdle to change how we've all been taught.
Yeah, I think the whole collaboration bit is what's really missing right now. We have all the individual tools, but I haven't really seen an example where people have used all of these in conjunction to make these big decisions, especially when you're bringing in additional stakeholders like the government here, and like all of these ones, which are typically not considered for most brands, right? So, having said that, like, do you have any examples from your own kind of experience in working with brands, and I'm talking in general to all three of you, where you've seen people take this data and actually act on it? Because right now I think there's a data overload happening even with Green Story. When we do an impact assessment, typically we give these are the hotspots, and we've seen some brands act on them. But from your perspective, have you seen like maybe like a North Star brand or something where they've really kind of done something incredible with gathering all this data and truly made a change? I think that also speaks to one of the questions that was there in the chat.
Who wants to go? I can give we've lost Antoine again. I can say a few things. I think for us, it's we see more kind of changes in mindset, and I think so it's a little bit less tangible than like implementing data, like implementing kind of making changes off the back of data. But I think, you know, what we've noticed is that it's more kind of the you know, behavioral changes of how you work with your partners and improving that. And I think that it's probably a little bit more relationship based improvement and the kind of human aspect rather than actioning data. So I think that's probably what we've seen.
I mean, on our side, I mean, we see all sorts of outcomes. I mean, we see companies, you know, taking action because they do identify that, for instance, I mean, I will not definitely give out names here, but, you know, cases of harassments that are being, you know, uncovered by the worker feedback and being addressed, wage theft that is being, you know, identified and addressed, migrant worker fees being, you know, identified by the worker feedback that again leads to different forms of remediation. So what I think is clear is that that capacity to identify is there. So that's one element. The second that I find interesting is the fact that it's not just about data, it's about communication. So you're creating a two-way dialogue with the workers. And so the solutions to the problems that are being raised by the workers, I mean, they are not simple sometimes, and we also see workers have to be part of the change. They're not just like, you know, a factor that is, you know, discontented with a particular practices, however egregious that is. They need to become a change agent that is also part of the solution, because they know best what will make a difference for them. And so it's not just about having that extraction of data and saying we'll do something or we won't. It's about really working together in dialoguing to get to solutions.
Absolutely, and I think it's like also empowering them with the information they need in order to make those decisions, and the right people at the right time, like Flora said, like having it pop up on the screen when they're making a decision, so they understand this is what needs to be done, right? Okay, this is actually a great question from the audience, which I'd like to address from Max Fellman. And he said, you know, talking about decisions, most brands make decisions based on consumer preferences and demand. And what role does the consumer education then play in driving a more sustainable and ethical industry? And is there a way, from your experience, to train consumers around to make those better decisions using LCA data or whatever other information is out there?
Yeah, I can take that one first.
I figure it's a Remake's question there.
Well, first I would want to push back on the question a little bit. A lot of what we talk about is, you know, there's been so much pressure put on the consumer to make changes both for themselves or to make the industry change, but there's enough information out there that brands have the information they need to change. So a little bit still is like holding brands responsible and not making consumers feel like, you know, how do I change this massive decentralized global industry that I'm not directly a part of? So I think that's one piece to continually remember, because I think brands like to make us feel, or the fashion industry like to make consumers feel like it's on our shoulders when it's not. And then I think the other piece is, and this is something that Remake's paid a lot of attention to, and we're constantly asking, is like, how do we take issues about human rights labor issues that have been talked about for such a long time, but move them into this mainstream conversation and make this complex data feel relatable and tangible. And that's so much of what we've been working on with the Pay Up campaign, right? How do you take conversations around purchasing practices, but making consumers feel like that's something they can be a part of changing? So one piece is, we focus on keeping it simple. We created the Pay Up Fashion Petition. So as a consumer, if you go to payupfashion.com and you sign this petition, then you will, be sending out letters to brands, at CEOs, head of stakeholders, and letting them know that you want their practices to change. You're looking for more transparency. You're looking for more ethical behavior from them. And then I think it's about bringing them along that journey too. And I think a good part of like what Aisha's done, she's the founder of Remake, is she's built those relationships with garment workers, and she's built relationships with with Gap and Nike and Adidas, with people working in this industry, because you got to keep that communication open. And we kind of share that story with consumers. So I think it's a balance of, we shouldn't have to expect consumers to be able to digest all this data, but we should be able to bring them along the journey in the process and help them feel empowered. But remember, brands have the information out there. They're actively making the decisions not to do it.
Antoine, you want to chime in?
I mean, there is a role for data. I mean, I agree with Sam in general. I don't think we should wait for the consumers to be the one that are going to adjudicate that. I think there are a number of reasons to to abide by just the law. And if you are just doing that, I think that would already be quite a step forward in a number of places. Now, clearly there is more demand. I mean, at least you see a trend towards a desire for more ethical consumption. Now that doesn't always translate in how spending happens. So I think that's and I think you cannot just ride on the wave of the ethical shopper is still elusive. So I think you have to be careful with that. But there's enough of work to be done with that. I mean, we work a lot with certification standards to help make sure that if you're going to buy a product that is certified to be fair in one way or form, I mean, without naming any scheme, that reflects underlying working conditions that are genuine and that you can really be confident about that. So I think there's a lot of work that is ongoing by a number of groups to increase the robustness of the data and the credibility of the standards, because otherwise you run the risk of whitewashing or greenwashing the issue. And at least I see our role as trying to help combat that, and not. I mean, I'm not about to announce any new label. Don't worry, because that's not our plan. We're trying to really empower organizations to achieve these goals.
Wonderful. Flora, do you have anything to add on that?
I mean, probably a few things on the consumer front is really, we can expect the consumer to take responsibility after they purchase and what happens in the end of life and in terms of kind of how much they're buying and in kind of bringing in kind of rental and vintage into their wardrobe. But I think when it comes to, what you can't expect a consumer to consider the impact in detail of every single product they buy. You can get them to consider that should they be buying so many products in the first place, it needs to get to the point where it's just standard and that they don't necessarily need, that information is there for those who care about it, who want to read in, but that actually is standard for all businesses. I think I remember someone saying a few years back, which I really liked, is that, this idea that that a brand cares about these things, so that when you walk through that door of that store, physical or digital, you trust that whatever's in that store is good and right. So it's almost like you can make the decision to walk through the right door in the first place, and after that it's desire, it's whatever you want to buy, what makes you feel good, and you can't stop shoppers buying what they want and what they like. Purchasing is about, it's more visceral and it's more emotional than that. People don't buy something because it's sustainable, they buy it because they like it. It just needs to be that. So I think really, you can't have that level of expectation on consumers.
Absolutely. One thing I'd like to add is, one of the things we realized really early on is you really can't get consumers to go and, find out this information on their own. Like, you can make as many sustainability reports as clearly as you want, but 1% of your visitors, if you're lucky, is going to read it. So you need to kind of say it at every stage and kind of show that. Like when we do LCA information, one of the things that we ensure is that information, we don't work with a brand unless that information is going to be put front and center along the customer's journey, right? And I think it's the brand's job to make the consumers understand what they're doing and kind of visualize it for them, instead of getting the consumers to do the legwork to understand something as difficult and technical as LCA. Just kind of give them high level information. I'm a lazy shopper myself. I just want to know just right away, is it okay? Like, oh, okay, this is like the numbers. I get it. Let's leave it be. Now I can just evaluate the product, right? But you need to show it as I'm making the purchase instead of making me go and Wikipedia it. So
calories when you buy food in the supermarket, you think, okay, there's a traffic light here and some calories, big, small. It's easy. It's at the point of purchase. I love it.
And people kind of know that numbers now. I think there's this old school thinking that you need to have a traffic light system, but we read calories all the time. So as long as you can present the data in some way, I think people kind of get it. So I think the training is already being done at a macro level. The cool thing that I'm seeing now is like fashion is like 99% of fashion is very much a laggard industry, where they're just seeing who's going to go out there and take the arrows for testing something out, like maybe like Ulula or something, testing a new system out, and then other people follow and they say, oh, that person has done it. So if you can kind of demonstrate this and make sure that you have a few brands following in, I think the other brands will see the data, will see the trends, and tend to follow through. I've seen that with companies which are really large in the retail space. I'm not going to reveal their names, but their household names. They're surprisingly moving really hard towards sustainability because they're seeing the consumer trends that are happening in the space. So I do think consumers have a big role to play in it, in the trend, but I don't think it's their responsibility, just to kind of echo all of your points there. It's the brand's responsibility to show it to the consumers. Okay, cool. That actually brings me to another point about the partnerships that we talked about. So one of the things that's really missing right now when I see in fashion is like it's all these silos that exist, and there's not as much full collaboration that's going on. Can you talk to me a little bit about the strategic partnerships that are out there right now, organizations, institutions that are making this possible, and how you kind of see that evolving, either ones that you're involved with or things that you see the industry developing in the future?
I mean, I can go first in terms of like partnerships or collaborations. I mean, Remake, we've learned a massive lesson from this when we launched the Pay Up campaign. Like, it's been so much stronger since we work with, Stand Up Sri Lanka, which is an organization in Sri Lanka that's representative of garment workers. So again, hearing directly from workers is our big focus, but then working with like the Aja Foundation or working with the Union of Concerned Researchers and Technologists for Fashion. And so I think it's like constantly bringing together nonprofits and coalitions or union groups that working in the industry so that we can create this, bring together data, whether it's data from people's stories or whether it's data collected from a system. I think is really important to constantly do that because throughout the fashion industry, if we talked about like tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, like everything becomes more opaque. So it's kind of like we need that constant conversation of coalitions happening and having those feedback loops. I think that's been some of the best things that have happened is we've set up one-off calls every other week or monthly with groups and opening them up to people who care and want to be a part of changing the fashion industry to just say like, what is everyone hearing? What is everyone experiencing? Let's get on the same page so we can have this like same ask. And that's from us as being like an advocacy organization working to hold the industry accountable.
From our side, I think that we can see, I don't know if to simplify, there are two types of partnership. There are like trust partnerships in a sense where I think it's exactly what Sam was saying, where technology alone, it has limitations as we've said. So in order for technology to really reach its potential, you do need to embed it in with organizations that are on the ground, that have the legitimacy, that have the connections, etc. So we have similar engagements with local groups that are helping socialize the technology and build the trust from workers, and also build a healthy ecosystem of data where data is going to these groups and can then be used for change. So that's one aspect. I think the second is thinking about what is leveraging the data for greater impact. And there you're looking at different types of partnerships in a sense. I mean, the advocacy, the amplification that happens on the ground is great. You also have more industry association partnerships. So starting a collaboration, for instance, recently with Better Cotton Initiative, which brings together lots of producers. And I mean, individually, some of the groups won't have a lot of impact, but if you can tap into the collective power of these organizations, then that's something that's helpful. We're working with M4E on grievance mechanisms in Vietnam. Again, that the collective, if you can solve the collective action, because technology can connect all of these players and share data in ways that other mechanisms wouldn't, then you have a power. And I think, and that the third is how we leverage our data, which is a small piece of the puzzle, into bigger aggregators. So how the social data is aggregated by an EcoVadis, for instance, to create better sustainability ratings. These are interesting movements. I mean, just to name a few.
Yeah, I think probably to add that, I'll probably kind of take it from a different angle, which is looking at brands and their supplier manufacturers as strategic partnerships. And I think something that we noticed at the start of our journey, which has actually changed during the time, during the last 4 years, is the kind of secrecy, people wanting to keep their relationships secret. And, even we still get pushback when, brands invite their manufacturers, they work, it's private, they work directly with their factories in our platform. But even they say if our factory uses your platform, does that mean that they might find other brands to work with? Could our competitors find them? And we're just thinking, they can't, but just so you know, this is the vision for the future, is actually not this kind of secrecy part. And ultimately, I totally respect that for lots of businesses, SMEs particularly, it can be their secret sauce, their relationship they built up. But rest assured, if you've got a great relationship and you spent a lot of time building that, then a new brand could come in and try and work with the same factory and not have a good time, because ultimately it's about relationships at the end of the day that makes it good. But I think that really, our focus of getting the brand supplier relationship or the brand factory relationship to move from, in many businesses, it's still very transactional, and it may not be, there's plenty of businesses who it's not at all, and there's lots of people leading the way, but there is a majority that this is not the case. And I think that really what we're keen to see, we've started to trial this out for brands and factories that we work with, is sharing of materials across businesses. So we sometimes see brands in our network use the same materials across orders who are working with the same factory. They don't need to directly be in contact with each other. It's not direct competition. They're using the same materials. They know they are, but they're both getting a better price. They can get better access to sustainable materials. The same with factory, the factory relationship network. I think what we learned from our time in India, there's relationships that have taken decades to build, and to come in and say, hey, we've got this great new supplier, why don't you use them? And they go, well, this is the guy that we've had a relationship for 20 years. And so you've also got to respect the existing partnerships and relationships that exist and enter into them kind of respectfully. So I think it's a really interesting one, partnerships, because it means different things in different parts of the supply chain. But yeah.
Fantastic answers. And one of the things that I'd also just quickly like to give a shout out to is the UN Alliance for Sustainable Fashion. Kerry Bannigan and her crew have really done a job trying to kind of bring all these moving parts together and connect them through a lot of the work that they've done. So we need more of those. So hopefully that's something that's being built up. I think we have time for one more question, and this comes from Carrie, and she's asking, how do you take something like social impact and worker well-being and make it data-centric? It's kind of going back to what we talked about, social impact, or is data not the right route to go when it comes to these intangible impacts?
All right, I don't go ahead. So.
I'll just add my quick sentiment to this. And for us, it always has to be a combination of data and stories, because, and I think that's what, we see us as Remake. That's a lot of what our role is we take these research studies, this great data, and then turn it into storytelling in a way that makes sense, that bring others along and galvanizes a movement. And I think, when you're just looking at numbers aggregated across a bunch of people, you lose that human element of that suffering and that pain that so many women across the fashion industry are facing. So I think it's a constant balance of working across different organizations to really deliver the impact across, and then highlight, really, I think data can do a great job of, these brands have made commitments, but are we actually seeing data on the actual progress? And then I think that's an amazing place where data can have a better role in this whole conversation too. It's like brands are making more commitments because consumers are caring, but what are they actually doing to get there?
Yeah. I'll just add a tiny bit, because I know Antoine's he'll have a lot more to say on this. I think from my side, data is the kind of foundation, but it really ultimately, for me, when you conduct research, it's a mixture of qualitative and quantitative. You can't have one without the other. And I think the quantitative element is a critical, and if you get too hung up on one or the other, then you're missing half of the equation. So yeah, I think it has to come in tangent in kind of combination with stories and the people aspect.
I mean, yeah, on our side, I think when you see the work of Remake, I mean, you can see the power and success of storytelling. So there's no doubt about that. I think what we try and do is we take a more quantitative approach, and I think it's really important. And I completely echo the sentiment that was shared. So you can turn, you can turn, workers' feedback into quantitative estimates, and that's important because you can't get a story out of every factory. And that story, I mean, you need to be able to really try to be able to hold accountable for progress, for failures, etc. And then that's also the basis of learning. So clearly. There is a way to turn, international standards and norms into questions that, in our case, that workers can answer, and we can identify whether 20% of the workers are saying yes, we're subject to overtime and we cannot choose, or 70% of the workers saying they paid exuberant recruiting fees to get their job. So that's really important, because you can assess the systemic nature of certain problems or not, in ways that stories, I think, fulfill just a different role. So I don't think it's one or the other. But in our case, I mean, the contribution that we make is obviously centered more around data, which is not I'm not conflating that with the idea that hence data is the only way to go. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and that's such an important role, as there's been so many holes poked into the big statements around the impact of fashion. It's like there is a need for constant, both from the environmental side and social side, which we've been mostly talking about, of better and better and better in data. Because again, that empowers us to take this data and this consumer interest back to legislators and say, look, here's the facts, here's the people who care. We have to change the system. So we certainly need to be together.
Maybe one point to add that I forgot to mention is, I think it's really important to empower people within the companies with data, because they tend to have to convince people from finance and people from that are fairly numeric centered and data centered that what they're doing it has impact and means something. So if you can show a CPA that the curve is going up or going down, you can have a conversation about it. And I think it's so certain tools are useful for certain audiences, but I think that clearly we see the sustainability and purchasing people that we work with that are champions for what we do, clearly be able to have greater impact within the company because they're equipped with better data to have these conversations.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for those answers. So we have a couple of minutes left, and this has been an amazing conversation. So before we kind of before I walk us out, is there anything that you'd like to talk to the audience about on how they can support your brands, your missions? Maybe Sam, you can start off.
Yeah. So I would say two things. One is if you can all go to payupfashion.com and sign that petition. We just hit our 10,000 signature mark, which is amazing, but it really is the tool. Yeah, it really is the tool we're going to be using to drive forward 7 demands that we have in the fashion industry. That is around signing enforceable contracts, giving workers center stage, ending starvation wages, helping pass laws. So again, you may think your one signature doesn't make a big difference, but when we're all signing it, and again, having that consumer indicator, it really is beneficial.
Fantastic. Antoine?
I would say just go and support Remake because they are a fantastic organization for sure. I'm not an advocacy organization, so what I would say is that what you've seen today is that if you have solutions that are available, I mean that technology is affordable, is accessible for you to start tackling the problem. Whether you start with Lula, Flora, Remake, or Print Story, you have ways to tackle these issues. And I don't know what's burning your pants, so to speak, but I think clearly technology has options that are available for that to move the needle in the right direction.
Great. Flora?
This is always a hard question. I would say that if you are a fashion business and stand back from your own day-to-day role and consider how what you do fits into the larger system, and just because something works for you and how you work day to day, think, okay, but actually what are the implications of this decision I'm making? And thinking even like that can be overwhelming if it's loads and loads of decisions you're making every day, but even just thinking at least once a day about certain decisions. And I think if you're not using software to manage production, have a think about it. If you're on Excel and email, think, is this really going to set me up for the future? But yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. These are 3 fantastic organizations. And from our side, if you are a consumer, keep asking what's my impact, keep asking the questions of the brands that makes a difference. If you're a brand, so many solutions out there, but definitely do look at it from a data-centric point of view as well as like a qualitative point of view. Both are important. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to our panelists. You guys were fantastic, and look forward to the next one. And I think in a month's time we'll have the follow-up webinar. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.